Come on. Run them jewels fast. Run them jewels fast. Run them jewels fast. Run them jewels fast.
Welcome to the Thanksgiving edition of the Sharp Football Analysis Podcast. My name is Warren Sharp of sharpfootballanalysis.com. It's already here, guys. Week 12. That means a couple things. Number one, it means Thanksgiving is here. Thanksgiving means great football, great food, great family, great friends, great beverages. It's just one of those days out of the year where it's not a religious holiday. It's football is on, and that's kind of ends up becoming what the holiday is all about for most of us who love football like we do. So it turned into a whole weekend where we've got, Thanksgiving kicks things off. Then we've got great college games on Friday and Saturday, and more NFL games. And unfortunately, the Monday night game is going to be a dud, but the Sunday night game should be pretty compelling. So a lot of great football games here this weekend, and a lot of time off from work for most people, and that means a lot more time to be able to spend with your family and watching these games. So we certainly are going to be breaking down a game that's going to kick off as I'm recording this in just under 24 hours, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Detroit Lions. That game featuring two teams who both had higher hopes, higher aspirations entering this season, both of which have bumbled themselves into losing records. One of which seems like they could be on a little bit better path, but really their performance hasn't been all that inspiring, let's say, and that's the Detroit Lions. They've been getting some wins, but they really haven't been sexy wins. They really haven't been really exciting wins, dominant wins. They've just been kind of getting the job done in some ugly football, inefficient football. And then you got the Philadelphia Eagles, who are magnificent in their defeat. They're getting blown out and completely plastered by some of their losses, and they don't do anything small there. They either win big or they lose big. Whatever it is, it ends up being pretty interesting. So not really excited about that game too much, but I'm really excited about the next game, Carolina at Dallas. I think it's going to be probably the best game that we have this entire weekend. A lot of fun. A lot of great things to discuss, and I dive deep into this game later on this podcast. A lot of great angles, edges, predictions in terms of matchups and edges. So I think that there's going to be a lot to discuss in that game, and I'll get into that more in detail. And then we cap the night off with the Chicago Bears traveling to Green Bay to take on the Packers in a resurgent Aaron Rodgers. But the reality is Aaron Rodgers really wasn't resurgent whatsoever. It was the running game getting on track, and I'll discuss that in great detail as this podcast continues about how Aaron Rodgers has continued to struggle in this offense, even though they had a dominant victory over the Minnesota Vikings, and what I think could set up in terms of this game with the Chicago Bears. But with that said, a lot of great games on Sunday as well. Week 12, like I mentioned, Thanksgiving, but also start of what has historically been a great late season run for me. So I'm going to do some promotions and specials up on the website if you guys are interested in that. Some discounts for you to get on board for the rest of the regular season, where I've done pretty well to close out the seasons in every single year of the last 5-6 years that I can remember. Have been tremendous results from about Thanksgiving to the end of the season. So there's that as well. This week, we are recording this podcast a day later. We're getting it out to a day and a half later than we normally do. And as a result, instead of focusing our attention on the games that we saw on Sunday, we're going to focus instead on the games that we're going to be seeing. We're going to be breaking down these games in great level of detail as we're looking at these upcoming matchups. We're going to be doing so more so on a macro perspective. We're not going to do game-by-game breakdowns. Those are going to be saved for the weekend edition. We are still doing the weekend edition. We are still getting together with Evan Silva of Roto World. We're still going to be doing that on Friday night, late into Saturday morning, and we're going to get that out to you on Saturday so that you can track that as you're watching some of the college games on Saturday. But with this edition of the podcast, instead, I'd like to focus on some of the games that are going to be upcoming this weekend, and utilize some of the results that we just saw, some of the advanced metrics, some of the takeaways, some of the struggles or edges that we saw from certain teams, apply that to this upcoming weekends of games. Look for things that we maybe thought we saw with our eyes, but really watching again closer on tape or going through some of the advanced metrics, it didn't really look the way that it did, and that can provide us at times with edges this upcoming week. So a lot of great information that we're going to get into on this podcast, but very, very, very different than what we usually attack in this early edition week podcast. But with that said, it is Thanksgiving. We'll jump right into it after I wish you guys a very happy Thanksgiving. I hope that you guys are first and foremost safe, and hope that you guys and your families are safe with whatever travels that you may be doing. Enjoy this time of the year. Enjoy the time that you get to spend with family or relatives or friends, and try to enjoy every minute of it. Have some fun. Life is too short to not take advantage of times like this. And even if you don't have a lot going on, there's a lot of great football to watch. There's a lot of great entertainment that you can have in other ways. So if you don't have the family around, there's still a lot of great things that you can be thankful for, I'm sure. But definitely this time of year, just try to enjoy everything, because life is too short to be sure. With that said, let's jump right into discussing these games. All right, guys, first game we're going to discuss is the most important game that we saw last week, the game that had the most playoff implications, and that is the Minnesota Vikings hosting the Green Bay Packers. And if you're looking at this game, you watched it sort of through, the lens of watching a bunch of these games at once, and then you saw the final score, and you see a 30-13 game that the Green Bay Packers appear to have dominated. You're definitely going to think first and foremost, hey, Aaron Rodgers probably a pretty good passing day. That would be wrong. Then you're going to think, hey, look at the box score. Adrian Peterson, only 45 rushing yards against the Packers' run defense. Wow, that was terrible performance from him. I wonder what they did to stop the run. And you'd actually be slightly wrong if you think that there was no opportunities for the Minnesota Vikings to run the football. The problem was their conservative nature and predictable nature on first down. So let me go through that with you guys. First and foremost, Adrian Peterson, only 13 rushing attempts. Guess how many of those 13, just gave it away, were on first down. 8 of the 13 were on first down. That's well over 60%. Now, on those first down runs, they gained only 1.6 yards per attempt. Only 1.6 yards per attempt on those first down runs. As a result, they decided that they needed to abandon the run in the second half. And in the second half, Minnesota called 28 pass plays and only 4 running back runs. That is correct. That's not a typo. Teddy Bridgewater was sacked 3 times. He threw the ball 25 times in the second half. But they called 28 pass plays and only 4 Adrian Peterson runs. There was no other handoffs to any other running back whatsoever in this entire game. Adrian Peterson was the only running back who took a carry, but he only ran it 4 times in the second half. Absolutely ridiculous balance from the Minnesota Vikings. Now, here's the issue. On first down, in the entire first half and into 10 minutes into the third quarter, they had 13 first down plays. They called 8 runs on those 13 first down plays. They only called a handful of passes. Teddy Bridgewater actually went 3 of 3 for 5.3 yards per attempt. So he didn't have a single incompletion on first down, but he was sacked twice. But watch this. The Minnesota Vikings, on those 13 first down plays to start the game all the way through till 10 minutes into the third quarter, 13 first down plays, they gained a total of 7 yards. A total of 7 yards on those 13 first down plays. I'm not talking about an average. I'm talking about a total of 7 yards on 13 first down plays. That is the way that you are going to set yourselves up for second and long and third and long, and you're not going to have a lot of success when you're getting into second and long and third and long due to their inefficiency on first down. They started the game, I believe, with 4 out of the 5 plays on 1st and 10 were runs to Adrian Peterson. They needed to be far more diverse. And what ended up happening was they saw that they were getting themselves into a little bit of a hole. They thought that Adrian Peterson couldn't run, and so they abandoned the run. Exactly what Green Bay wanted them to do. Exactly what Green Bay wanted them to do. Now, Teddy Bridgewater was having a pretty good day overall. He did, those stats ring true, and those are correct. He had a very good day passing, and we're going to get into some of the numbers in terms of what he did in first and second down, what he did in deep passing, what he did in the scoring zone. He had a very good day overall. The problem was that they were not balanced whatsoever, and it gave the Packers a lot of ability to call plays defensively to really try to get the Vikings off their game, and they stopped utilizing the run which meant that incompletion stopped the ball, or stopped the clock, which meant more time for Aaron Rodgers and that offense out on the field. Now, when Adrian Peterson ran the ball on any down other than first down, he gained 6.4 yards per attempt. That's what I'm trying to say, is that they ran the ball on first down. He didn't have a lot of success, so they decided to abandon the run. They only run the ball 4 times in the second half, yet Adrian Peterson was great running on other downs other than first. Green Bay just anticipated it and stacked the box to stop him from running the ball on first down. And it's not as if Adrian Peterson had a gain of 40 yards on one of these runs on second down and the rest were 1-yard gains. Only one out of his runs on any other down other than first did he gain less than 4 yards. So he was very productive and effective over the long haul for these different runs on other downs. He was very successful overall, but just one run he had 1 yard. The rest of them were 4 or more yards that he was getting on a continuous basis. But they just stopped running the ball on downs other than first, and then they stopped running the ball completely. It was a terrible game plan, a terrible strategy. Secondly, what killed him in that game was penalties. Those were a huge deal. These are hidden yards that we talk about that determine games. You could have 100 rushing yards, and that's going to help you out. If you have an extra 100 receiving yards because of a huge pass play, that's going to help you out. What happens if you have 100 extra yards than your opponent in penalties? That's really going to help you out, and that's exactly what happened here. Minnesota was penalized 8 times for 110 yards. Packers were only penalized 4 times for 19 yards, so it's not exactly 100, but it's pretty close to a 100-yard differential there in terms of penalty yardage. And I'll go to one play in particular that I think really swung this game completely. This single play swung this game off the hinges, in my opinion. The game is very close into the second quarter, and they're about to head into halftime. The Packers have the ball. They're up 3. The score is 9-6. And the Green Bay Packers, immediately after the 2-minute warning, are facing a 3rd and 15 at their own 15-yard line. So if the Vikings can just get a stop, they're going to be a few yards away from being in field goal range with about 2 minutes left in the half. That's a very good opportunity for them to just tie this game right up. A totally different perspective entering, halftime and coming out of the second half. But they could have even gotten a lead if they had scored a touchdown. So a lot of opportunities if they just get off the field. But they've got Green Bay at 3rd and 15 at their own 15. So the Packers, obviously, they're just hoping not to turn the ball over. They're trying to gain a first down. They don't want to be too crazy. What ends up happening? Aaron Rodgers takes a huge deep shot to one of his wide receivers, this guy Janis. And Terrence Newman is flagged for a 50-yard defensive pass interference penalty. It takes the Packers from a 3rd and 15 on their own 15 to a 1st and 10 on the Vikings 35. That 50-yard gain puts the Packers almost in field goal range right there and there. With 1 minute 45 seconds left, they end up driving the ball closer to the end zone, and they end up scoring a touchdown to Randall Cobb with 10 seconds left, and the Packers go up 16-6 at halftime. A totally different perspective for the Vikings, clearly, because the Vikings come out in the second half and call 28 pass plays and only 4 run plays, that balance is terrible. The first half, they were very balanced. They just needed to be more diverse with their play calls on first down and realize what the Packers are doing and change up their strategy and stop running the ball so much on first down, start being more balanced and run the ball a lot more on second and third down. They did not do that, and then they abandoned it because the Packers were up by 10 points at halftime, 10 points which came from this 50-yard defensive pass penalty. So penalties are key. There was a number of offensive holding penalties against the Vikings as well. Those types of mistakes just cannot happen. You cannot allow yourselves to give the opponent about 100 yards of penalty edge over you. And that was a big deal. And this game was in Minnesota. It was going to probably set up the Vikings, if they win this game, for definitely the inside track at winning that division. Potentially, obviously hosting a wild card game with the outside shot of actually being able to advance into a first round bye. And none of that's going to happen at this point in time. I don't expect. Their record just simply is not good enough for them to probably get that first round bye, and it's going to be difficult now that they lost this game to the Packers. So, Huge game, huge loss that was primarily due to stupid play calling and decision making, being too conservative and predictable, as well as abandoning the run in the second half, not running when you need to be running on second and third downs, and stupid penalties. All right, the next game to discuss is the best game of the day on Thanksgiving, and that's the Carolina Panthers at the Dallas Cowboys. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And part of the reason is because of what the line makers did here when they opened this number. Talking about this game, I've gone on record. I went on record on this podcast last week. I went on record even before that, talking about my opinion of the Dallas Cowboys. When everybody was talking about the balance of power in the NFC, nobody was really mentioning the Dallas Cowboys, except for me. And I was talking about how the Dallas Cowboys didn't really lose many of these games by a large margin, despite Tony Romo not being there. If they don't have all the turnovers that they had, if they had slightly better performance by their quarterback, they're winning at least half of those games that they lost. They're definitely not winning the game against the New England Patriots. But the rest of those games, particularly the overtime games against the Saints and against the Philadelphia Eagles, as well as the game against the New York Giants where they dominated the stat sheet but had 4 turnovers in that game, they're going to win a lot of those games. And so I felt like the Dallas Cowboys were a team to look out for. Last week, what did we do? We bet the Dallas Cowboys, and the Dallas Cowboys went into Miami in Tony Romo's first game back and walked away with a 10-point victory. This is a team that's going to try to possess the football. This is going to be a team that's going to try to run the football, and they're going to try to keep their defense rested and healthy enough to get back after you when they have a slight lead so that you are forced into less time with the ball and more things that you're going to have to do with the ball, which puts pressure on your offense to excel. And the Dallas Cowboys defense gets opportunistic, gets takeaways, and tries to take advantage of that. But the interesting part about this game to me, let's just start first and foremost, is with the line. The last 25 years, there's only been 12 teams who are undefeated at week 11 or later. Now, we're in week 12 right now, but I backed it up a week just to do week 11 or later, that have gone on the road and played a team that did not have a winning record, which is exactly what is happening here. Carolina is undefeated. It's after week 11. They're on the road and playing a team who does not have a winning record. That's the Dallas Cowboys. It's only happened 12 times because it's rare that teams are undefeated this late in the year. And all 12 of the times, the undefeated team was favored in the game. And on average, those teams were favored by 9 points per game. But it always was by at least 3 points. So the last 25 years, we have never seen a team with a losing record favored against a team that's undefeated this time of the season. We've never seen a team that's even if Dallas moves to +1 or +2, we won't have ever seen that either. It's a pretty rare and remarkable line that has been set here on the Dallas Cowboys. Now, here's an interesting tidbit. The undefeated teams, after the first quarter, on average, they actually trailed on the road against these teams, despite being favored by an average of 9 points per game. Not since 2009, there's been 5 of these games, and not a single time has the undefeated team held a lead after the first quarter. So they've generally started off pretty slow in these games. They've poured it on later in the games. Over time, the better team tends to find more edges, and it's a little bit more advantageous for an underdog or a team that's probably slightly worse to do some things creatively or get some luck their way to get a lead or at least be tied in that game, earlier in that game. The undefeated teams go 9-3 in those 12 games, so they win 9 of them, but they go 6-6 ATS. So I would have loved to take the Dallas Cowboys if they're catching some points here. That would have been, one of the stronger moves of the week, in my opinion, is to grab Dallas catching points. You definitely have to reassess things when they're actually laying points or at a pick'em, which is essentially what they are at the time that I'm recording this podcast. It is pretty remarkable. Now, a couple other factors in this game. Number one, go ahead and look at the Carolina Panthers schedule. Go ahead and look at that schedule. Look long and hard and try to find some road games that they've actually played. Some road games against decent competition. You won't really be able to find it. Their only road games this year were at Jacksonville, at Tampa Bay, at Tennessee, and at Seattle. Now, we know what happened in that Seattle game. Cam Newton, massive performance late in the game, came from behind, very difficult place to play. Tremendous game from the Carolina Panthers in that situation to come back when they were down. But that's the point. They were down in that game. Their other games were just Jacksonville, Tampa Bay, and Tennessee. Now, personally, I'm pretty high on Jacksonville and Tampa Bay. I like their offenses. I like their aggressiveness. I like the fact that now Tampa Bay is healthy. They've got Vincent Jackson back in the fold, and they've been able to utilize the downfield passing attack from Jameis Winston. And same thing with Blake Bortles in Jacksonville and his targets, from the tight end position, Julius Thomas, to the wide receiver stable that they've got. A lot of excitement there, but let's not try to convince ourselves that those are great teams. Let's not try to convince ourselves that, especially when they played those teams, that those were great teams. We're talking about games that the Carolina Panthers played in the first month of the season. Obviously Jameis Winston is not going to be playing well the first month of the season. Obviously Jacksonville, without Julius Thomas even there due to injury, is not going to be playing all that well in week 1. Fast forward down to week 10 or 11 or 12, and you got these teams, they're in sync, the quarterbacks are comfortable with the offense, the wide receivers have better chemistry with the quarterback, and they're playing a lot better. So catching those two teams that early in the season obviously is more beneficial than it would be, let's say, if they played the Giants now versus earlier in the year. Eli Manning has the same type of chemistry with his wide receivers there, but for young quarterbacks, that chemistry tends to evolve, especially when you're integrating new weapons and you're a very young quarterback like those are. So I don't really view those wins as super impressive. Then they played Tennessee. That game against Tennessee, obviously they did have a strong performance in that game. They won 27-10. And had a huge edge from an early down success rate perspective in that game. But I will mention this. When Tony Romo has played, which is weeks 1, 2, and 11, the Dallas Cowboys never lost the early down success rate battle. They were very dominant from an early down success rate perspective. And here's a surprising thing that may not make people think that this could be possible. But the Dallas Cowboys actually on the season are one of the best teams in the NFL from an early down success rate perspective. They actually rank 4th overall, and that's with Tony Romo only playing a couple of games. Even without Tony Romo in there, they were very adept and very good at avoiding third downs and converting first downs on first and second down. Very strong in that perspective, and they were one of the best last year with Tony Romo. So now that they've got Tony Romo back, that's going to be a key factor. But backing up for a second against the Carolina Panthers, they've played their last 4 out of their last 5 games at home. So this is a team that doesn't really go on the road very much. They have not had to go on the road very much. Their only road game, actually since week 6, we're now in week 12, mind you, their only road game since week 6 was at Tennessee. Okay, so this is a team they're going to have to go into Dallas and face Dallas Cowboys on a short week. I think that's definitely a big edge for Dallas. And another big edge for Dallas is the fact that they have been able to run the ball. And the Panthers have a good run defense. They're 11th in efficiency. However, look who they've recently faced. They faced the Washington Redskins, who were 30th offensively in run efficiency. They faced the Tennessee Titans, who were 26th. They faced the Green Bay Packers, who are 12th on the year, though they weren't running the football very well. Eddie Lacy was beat up. The last month or so, the Packers have not been running the ball very well. They got to take on the Packers during that time span. So that 12th rating is lower. It would be lower during that time span. On the course of the year, it's 12th. But when the Packers faced the Panthers, they were not the 12th most efficient team at that point in time. And then the Colts, who were 23rd. Dallas ranks 6th in run efficiency, and that's over the course of the season. They're going to be better at running the football when they do have Tony Romo in there. The interesting fact about this game is that I think both of these teams are obviously very similar, but they're very different at the same time. Let's look at the passing attack. The Dallas Cowboys would like to run the football, and they'll pass when they need to, which is the same thing that the Carolina Panthers will do. Dallas has the far more efficient and effective pocket passing quarterback in Tony Romo. They also have better downfield weapons when you're talking about pedigree, such as Dez Bryant, in terms of a pure number one wide receiver. And then they sprinkle in there Jason Witten and some of their other guys. Obviously, Williams coming on, catching the ball from Tony Romo. So they've got some other guys that have skill there. But Dallas is obviously the more mature, the more developed downfield passing offense. The Carolina Panthers passing offense is 100% Cam Newton, just making great throws. It's a little bit more erratic than the Dallas Cowboys offense. It's a little bit less consistent, but he will get some big plays, not because his wide receivers are great, not because they're super talented, but Cam will on occasion make some ridiculously strong throws in key situations to help that team out. That team is all Cam Newton. So if you're looking at consistency, it's going to come from Dallas in the passing game. But if you're looking at overall effectiveness, both these teams can be very effective passing the football. And that's set up by the run, and that's consistent with both teams. But the run game is very different as well. The run game for the Carolina Panthers is set up generally through their schemes and their running principles and their diversity of the run game. You know, they have so many different things that they can do running the football. They're just so diverse with that running attack. It's very difficult to try to match up with that running attack that the Carolina Panthers have. That's why they're so successful. Whether it's read option, whether it's quarterback keepers, they just do so many different things that make your defenders have to pay attention, have to keep the eyes in the backfield, and that's what helps their pass game tremendously. Dallas doesn't have that at all. What Dallas has is a very good run-blocking offensive line. That's about it. You know, Dallas, they say that whatever running back there is going to get the job done, but we've seen that hasn't been the case. I mean, they've cycled through a variety of different running backs in the backfield. Right now, they're on Darren McFadden, and yeah, he had a good game. We'll see if he has a good game this week, but that you need a good running back behind a good offensive line. I don't care who the running back is. If you're a bad running back, or if you're not going to get to the holes, you're not going to get through the holes with speed, you're not going to have vision, then it doesn't matter what offensive line you have, you're not going to get the gains that need to be had. You know, Randall had an interesting comment last season about how DeMarco Murray left a lot of meat on the bone. And I assume what he was talking about there was the fact that the line was blocking, and an average running back should have gotten 7 yards, and DeMarco maybe got 4 yards. I don't necessarily agree with that, and Randall certainly didn't showcase that he was the back who was going to be able to exploit those holes. But I will agree with the principle that an offensive line on a given play will set up for an average running back to gain X yards. And the question mark becomes, does Dallas have a running back who will gain those X yards from a run-blocked play? Or is their running back going to gain above that or below that? And I generally tend to think that DeMarco Murray, particularly in this matchup, is going to gain less than what the offensive line blocks, but I'd like to be pleasantly surprised to find that he's gaining more than what the offensive line is capable of blocking, or at a minimum, whatever the line can open up. Because that line is very good, and that line can open up holes, and as I mentioned, the Carolina Panthers have not exactly faced a cadre of extremely talented running schemes and extremely talented run-blocking offensive lines over the last few weeks. But totally different run games, but at the end of the day, they've both been equally successful, equally productive when they're playing at their peak, when they're playing at their best. So I think this game sets up so interestingly because both these teams would like to do the same exact thing to one another. Both of these teams want to control the ball and possess the ball. We saw what the Dallas Cowboys did last week against the Miami Dolphins. We saw the ridiculous time of possession edge that they had in that game. In that game, the Dallas Cowboys held the ball for 39 minutes. The Dolphins held it for only 21. The Dallas Cowboys converted 50% of their third downs. So Dallas went to third down more than they were accustomed to last season, which could be to be expected. I mean, they're playing on the road in Tony Romo's first game back. They're playing in a torrential rain to start that game. It was a lot for them to overcome, and their backs are against the wall. They knew they had to win that game. I think this is a game where they can kind of keep things rolling a little bit. They can build off of that experience. They're playing back at home. They're playing in a place where they're very comfortable playing. I think this is going to be just a fascinating game. I'm really excited to see how much the Carolina Panthers run game is going to set up big things for them in their pass game, because I think if they can exploit the Cowboys secondary through the pass game by setting up the run, they're going to have some edges there. If Dallas can slow down that run game and really cover Greg Olsen well, it's going to be up to their cornerbacks to stop those big pass plays from happening. And I think that that's going to be one hell of a battle. I think it's going to be a battle that could go either way, to be honest with you. With some of the matchup edges that the Dallas Cowboys have passing the ball, it's going to be very important for Tony Romo to get that ball out quickly. He was sacked a couple times last week and took a number of hits, but I think that they'll have a little bit different game plan in this game against the Carolina Panthers to keep him upright, to keep him healthy. The interesting thing for the Carolina Panthers, they have not even allowed one trip to the red zone the last 2 weeks. Their defense has been extremely stout against the Washington Redskins, against the Tennessee Titans. Those teams haven't even gotten into the red zone once. So it's going to be very difficult. Sometimes you say the best defense for the Dallas Cowboys is going to be a good offense that's going to control the clock, keep that defense healthy. And that offense is going to have to get down into the red zone of the Carolina Panthers. I don't really see that offense busting out some big plays. I don't really see that offense, with the exception of maybe a nice pass or two. I don't see that run game really getting anything going against the Carolina Panthers in terms of long gains. So they're going to have to get down into the red zone and be effective when they're in the red zone. They're going to have to convert down inside the red zone. Tony Romo's going to have to make good decisions. They got into the red zone 3 times last week against the Miami Dolphins, and they converted 1 for a touchdown. That ratio is going to have to improve tremendously for them to have success against the Carolina Panthers. But I really can't wait for this game. It's probably going to be the best game of the day, in my opinion, and the game I'm certainly looking forward to the most. All right, next up, I'm going to be talking about the Sunday night game, the New England Patriots at the Denver Broncos. Obviously, some of the games this weekend are absolutely incredible. Starting with that Carolina-Dallas game that we just talked about. I think there's a variety of games on Sunday afternoon that are going to be insanely competitive and very strong to watch. A good viewer factor when you're watching these games, and certainly the Sunday night game is going to be right there. But one quick rant that I've got for you guys with regard to the scheduling is, why in the hell are they scheduling 9 games at 1 o'clock and only 2 games at the 4 p.m. slot? And one of those games comes at 4 o'clock and one game comes at 4:25, all these times, of course, Eastern time. It makes absolutely no sense. The NFL has been doing this for years, except it just gets weighted poorly. Last week, for the last several weeks, we've had 8 games at 1 o'clock and we have 3 games maybe at 4 o'clock. Now they're only giving us 2 games at 4 o'clock, and there's absolutely no reason for that. I certainly would love to see a game like the New York Giants-Washington Redskins game be moved to 4 o'clock. I certainly would like to see 2 games, 5-5 teams, Tampa Bay Bucks versus the Indianapolis Colts, one of those games be in the later time slot. There's absolutely no reason to have only 2 games at the 4 p.m. time slot and have 9 games at the earlier time slot. Makes absolutely no sense to me. So I have no idea why the NFL schedules things that way. I can tell you from a viewer perspective, from a perspective of most people sitting at home, you're going to get those people sitting on their couch forever if you can schedule some great 4 p.m. games and 6 or 7 1 p.m. games. There's no need to schedule so many games at 1 p.m. and so few games at 4 p.m. But that point aside, because the NFL has been doing that for years, let's talk a little bit about this Patriots-Broncos game. Last week we saw Brock Osweiler, and that was a game last week. I was on the Denver Broncos. I was against the New England Patriots by taking the Buffalo Bills. So that should give you a little bit of a clue as to my thought process on both of these teams right now. But when you look at my concern with the Denver Broncos this week was what they did with Brock Osweiler last week. Now, I know it was his first game in there. and he was very efficient with his passing. He was very efficient from the perspective that there were not a whole lot of incompletions. He was very efficient from the perspective that he did not turn the ball over at all. He went 20 of 27, which is 74% completions, 8.1 yards per attempt, a lot of which was stuff after the run too, for 122 passer rating. So on the surface, that looks great. But here's the thing. When his first read was taken away, he seemed to panic. And he ended up getting sacked 5 times in the game. They also were not pushing the ball down the field very much at all. He only took 2 pass attempts that were over 15 yards in the air, and he didn't complete a single one of those. So that's a definite concern for me, because now you're talking about going up against the Patriots, where if you're not going to push the ball down the field, and maybe they were setting this game up, I kind of doubt it. They wanted to see Brock Osweiler win this game. But if you're an offense that's going to restrict the quarterback from throwing the ball down the field to open things up, and you're an offense that's going to struggle when your first read gets taken away, Bill Belichick will own you. It's not even close. Bill Belichick will absolutely destroy a team if that quarterback does not know what to do if his first read is taken away, and they will not throw the ball down the field. That is a big, big problem. Big edge to Bill Belichick there. Now, on the reverse side, when we talk about the New England Patriots, played a very conservative game plan against the Buffalo Bills. Tom Brady clearly did not want to get hit much, although he was. He was throwing the ball away a ton in that game. A lot of his incompletions, and there were a lot of incompletions, were pass attempts where he didn't even try to fit it in there. He didn't even try to get aggressive with his pass, and some of the times it wasn't even about being aggressive. It was just about making a decision. That's why he only completed about 50% of his passes. If there was a defender or two nearby, he was just throwing the ball into the dirt. And you could say from one perspective that is showing respect to Rex Ryan's defense. But from another perspective, you could also say that it kind of shows that they think that they can beat the Bills without forcing anything. They can beat the Bills even if Brady throws 50% incompletions. That doesn't matter because the Bills' offense isn't going to be able to do enough against their defense. And Tom Brady and the Patriots, even with the depleted wide receiver core, is going to be able to make enough plays. Now this game, obviously, we'll have to see the status of Danny Amendola. It's early in the week. That's going to be a key element to this game because we saw how much they utilized him in the pass game. It's going to be difficult for them to make plays in this game without Danny Amendola in there. And then on the reverse side of things, it's going to be difficult for the Denver Broncos to make plays offensively if they don't have the ability to throw the ball down the field against this Patriots defense if they play conservatively. Because I can tell you one thing, they're not going to have as much run success against the Patriots as they had last week. The question mark is, did Brock Osweiler's presence open things up in the run game? Or did the run game get off to a spark and help Brock Osweiler out? I think it's more so the latter. I think it's because they went up against the Chicago Bears run defense. And I think it's because the Chicago Bears have a very bad run defense. The Chicago Bears run defense is not all that strong. The Chicago Bears run defense is 31st in the NFL. So you're talking about a team in the Denver Broncos that cannot run the football well whatsoever. You're talking about a team in the Denver Broncos who, on the year, their rushing offense ranks 27th in the league in terms of efficiency. Suddenly, they're having just a ridiculous day on the ground against the 31st ranked run defense. I think it's more so because that run defense was just terrible. But I will agree with Gary Kubiak that some of the boot action and the things that they do there with Brock Osweiler that they couldn't do with Peyton was helping out that run game. But that said, if you got Brock Osweiler and you know he's not going to throw the ball down the field much, I think that with one game on tape, Bill Belichick is going to be able to get some things off of that he's going to be able to use to his advantage to try to help slow that position down. So that's definitely a situation where I think that the Denver Broncos are going to be at a slight disadvantage against the Patriots. All right, next up, allow me to rant here slightly and indulge me with regard to throwing the ball down the field and the attempts that quarterbacks have. The Monday night game with the Bills and the Patriots, I was commenting how in the first half in particular, they hadn't targeted Sammy Watkins at all. And the week before that, Eli Manning targeted Odell Beckham 12 times in that game. And he had 8.7 yards per attempt and 1 touchdown. And the Giants almost won that game. And a large part was the fact that they were stretching the field. Now, they weren't successful every single time, certainly. Odell Beckham had a huge 87-yard reception that turned into a touchdown in that game. But you're not going to get those types of receptions if you don't try. Against a Bill Belichick coach defense where he's trying to take away that number one guy, if you just completely ignore that number one target, not much good happens for you. Look at what happened when Green Bay tried to do that same thing in Seattle last year, the year before, where they just ignored Richard Sherman's side of the field entirely. Look at what happened to the Bills when they tried to completely ignore going to Sammy Watkins early in the game. Nothing works out for a team who's going to just say, hey, this is our best guy, we make our big plays throwing the ball to him, but because we respect your defense too much there, we're not even going to go that direction. It'd be one thing if they had matchup edges at some of the other positions, and they're like, okay, fine, you double that guy. We really love our matchup with this wide receiver against your DB in man coverage. But the fact of the matter is there were no matchup edges like that for the Buffalo Bills. They weren't ridiculously productive throwing the ball to these other guys. So I felt that they needed to force the ball down the field more. And I was getting a little bit of feedback that wasn't really the right strategy to utilize. But here's the fact. If you look last week after the game, Bruce Arians came out, and I really respect Bruce Arians as a coordinator. I think you guys all know that. I definitely think that he's one of the best in the business. And he made the following quote: "If you don't try great shots, you won't hit one." And that's a great point that he makes, and it's pretty obvious. But let's look for a second at the teams who, and I'm isolating now, not desperation throws. I'm isolating out only deep passes, 15-plus yards down the field in the air, when a team is either tied or has a lead in a game this year. And take a look at the teams that are throwing the ball the most down the field. Now, not all of them are successful, particularly Cam Newton. But this is an order of number of attempts, decreasing order of number of attempts, 15-plus yards in the air down the field. Carson Palmer, number 1. Cam Newton, number 2. Andy Dalton, number 3. Tom Brady, number 4. You look at those 4 guys, look at their teams, look at their records that those teams have. Look at their ability to desire to try to push the ball down the field in some of these games. Now, Cam Newton is only completing 31% of those passes. He actually has a negative touchdown to interception ratio there. But the fact is, when he's pushing the ball down the field, obviously you don't want turnovers, those are big. But when you're pushing the ball down the field, it opens things up underneath for the run game. It opens things up underneath for other routes. It opens things up underneath for some of the tight ends to do some things underneath when you've got some deep shots going over the top. So there's a lot of edges that are gained by throwing the ball deep down the field. Then all of a sudden, as I'm recording this podcast, I see pop up here on Pro Football Talk that Rex Ryan came out just today, I guess, on the radio, talking about how that they needed to get Sammy Watkins more shots. And he said, quote, "You try to look at the defense and put your guys in an opportunity where they can be successful. You're trying to throw to the open guy. However, I think Sammy is such a talent, you could probably force the issue a little bit there. And obviously, if there's one-on-ones across the board, let's take our best shot. We'll throw it to our best against your best and see what happens, because I believe Sammy's that good." So obviously, this was a situation where they weren't getting Sammy Watkins the ball enough. They weren't taking enough shots down the field. And you're not going to make big plays if you don't try them. Just exactly what Bruce Arians said. And that's one of the reasons why his offense is so successful. They might try to throw the ball down the field 4 times to start the game, and they might make one of those as completion. I saw, if you remember the game against the Cleveland Browns, they started out that game, the Cleveland Browns actually had the lead in that game. Carson Palmer was overthrowing Michael Floyd down the field. These guys were wide open running down the field. They were just missing in terms of accuracy. But they kept up at it. They didn't say, oh, well, we can't hit the deep shots today. We're going to just go conservative. They kept at it, and they ended up blowing out the Cleveland Browns, thanks in large part to some big plays in the pass game. So if you're not trying to force the ball down the field in the deep passing game, I don't know how an offense in today's game is going to be very successful. And that's the interesting part, because when you look at some of these teams this year where you think that they struggle offensively, you think they have to win games defensively, and you look at the teams that are the best at it, you might think of the Carolina Panthers, you might think of the Seattle Seahawks as another team who gets the job done defensively and maybe is more a run-oriented offense. There's really not a whole lot of teams that you would think of in today's NFL right now that you think of as a more conservative, run-oriented offense that relies on their defense and their run game to win. Those are a couple of those teams. But guess what? Those teams throw the ball down the field an awful lot. Those teams try to take deep shots an awful lot. Russell Wilson actually has been very efficient at hitting the ball down the field in some of those games. And he's been performing pretty well in that. He's got a 109 passer rating when the game is tied or they have a lead at throwing the ball 15 plus yards in the air down the field to try to make plays. And he's done it as well when they're trailing. So to think that Seattle is a short ball control offense and they don't throw the ball deep, to think that Cam Newton and the Panthers are the same is wrong. Those teams are having success this year when they are winning games. Obviously, Cam Newton has not lost yet, but when they're hitting some of those deep passes, and same holds true for Seattle. So I definitely think that there are teams in the NFL who get far too conservative offensively and don't try to take deep shots in the pass game. There are teams in the NFL that I think don't take advantage of some of the rules that protect the quarterbacks in the pocket more than ever, that protect the wide receivers running the routes down the field. There's a lot of great things that can happen when you try to throw the ball deep down the field, and penalties are certainly one of them. And so the only negative penalty that you potentially could get on occasion is offensive pass interference would be offensive holding if you're trying to protect for that long. So you got to be smart about it, but teams that aren't pushing the ball down the field, I think, are not taking full advantage of the rules and the way that the NFL is being officiated in today's era. Last week we saw a number of teams not even make any trips at all into the red zone. We saw, first and foremost, last Thursday night on NFL Network, the Tennessee Titans had no trips into the Jaguars' red zone. On Sunday, we saw the Chargers make no trips into the Chiefs' red zone. The Eagles make no trips into the Buccaneers' red zone. The Redskins make no trips into the Panthers' red zone. And I want to go back to that first game that I mentioned, the Jaguars-Titans game, because while the Titans made 0 trips into the Jags' red zone, the Jaguars made 5 trips into the red zone of the Titans. 5. It's rare that you're going to see a team with 5 trips into the red zone, the opponent having none. And that team with the 5 trips is actually losing entering the fourth quarter. But that was the case on Thursday night. And part of the reason they were losing is because they went 1 of 5 in the red zone. And part of the reason they went 1 of 5 into the red zone was just ridiculously stupid play calling. The Jacksonville Jaguars are the NFL's worst team in running efficiency inside the red zone. Literally dead last in the NFL. They are terrible and extremely unproductive and inefficient running the football inside the red zone. They're playing a Titans team who has a very good run defense. A Titans team who is very good defending the run, in particular in the red zone. And so what do the Jacksonville Jaguars decide to do? On 11 of their play calls that they have inside the red zone, 11 play calls inside the red zone, they pass the ball 3 times. Blake Bortles has 3 pass attempts inside the red zone. When they're running the football, they gained 2.57 yards per carry. Obviously, that wasn't enough to get the job done, and the run conversion was a passing touchdown. So they need to reevaluate how they're calling the game. I think that they were doing it in this particular case because of the way that Blake Bortles was playing, because of how erratic he has been in that game and in games in the past where he would screw things up. So they decided to get very conservative. They also didn't have a lot of respect for what the Titans were going to be able to do to them from their offense to the Jags defense. So they felt that they could settle for field goals and possibly still win the game. I'm not sure what the rationale is there. But even more reason when you're in the red zone to try to score touchdowns. If you got a quarterback like Blake Bortles who might throw an interception, it could be returned for a pick six and you could lose the game that manner. So just a strange thought process for the Jaguars to decide to pick their weakness, which is the run offensive efficiency, where they rank dead last, and utilize that as much as they did. If you're the Titans, you are thinking, I hope they run the ball every single time that they're down here because they suck at it and we're good at defending it. And that's almost exactly what happened. Luckily, they did complete one pass inside the red zone and it was for a touchdown. And that's what helped them win that game. But just goes to show you how dumb coaches can be in terms of play calling. You have to understand what your team is good at and you have to understand what the weaknesses are of your opponent. And if you get scared that you think your quarterback's going to throw an interception, then call a more creative pass play that'll open things up a little bit better. You don't have to have your quarterback force the ball into man coverage if you think that that's what he struggles with. There's a variety of passing options that you can have, particularly down at the goal line, that involve pick plays, rub routes, and fades, and all types of things that could allow a quarterback to, with a very high degree, throw the ball where either his guy's going to catch it or nobody's going to catch it. You don't have to force your quarterback to throw the ball into coverage down at the goal line for a touchdown shot. But what you can't do is simply run the ball because you're scared, even though you know you stink at running the ball, and expect to do good things against a defense that's very good at stopping the run. All right, let's look at some of these metrics that we like to look at on the podcast. First and foremost, let's start with early down passing, first and second down passing. One of the best performances of the week we saw last week was Russell Wilson, who went 17 of 21, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 9 yards per attempt, and a 136 passer rating. This San Francisco 49ers defense is garbage. The Seattle Seahawks had to try to not score in that game, more or less. It was very easy, too easy, to move the ball down the field against that defense. It was pretty pathetic, the defensive effort that the San Francisco 49ers brought to that game. And obviously, it's kind of surprising. This team is off of a bye. This team knows that they need their defense to help support their offense, particularly with Blaine Gabbert at quarterback. And they go on the road to Seattle, and they completely lay an egg on the defensive side. You may expect their offense to lay an egg, but defensively, they've got to be better than that. Now they have to host the Arizona Cardinals. It's going to be very difficult for them, especially with how efficient and how multiple that Arizona offense is. They attack at all levels very frequently of your defense. It's going to be very difficult for that 49ers defense to hold up, in my opinion. Another guy who was very efficient on first, second down, Brock Osweiler, out in Chicago. Extremely efficient, a 128 passer rating, 79% completion, so very strong there. Jameis Winston, another guy who was less efficient from a completion perspective, like the guy below him, which is Cam Newton, but very efficient from a passer rating perspective due to the number of touchdowns that he was throwing on first and second down and the yards per attempt. Both those guys had over 120 passer rating and were third and fourth best in terms of passer rating on first and second down. Another guy that's interesting that I'll go ahead and throw on this list, who actually finished fifth, so it makes sense to talk about him next, but is interesting because of the team they are and what they did on the road overall in that game, and that's Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins against the Carolina Panthers on first and second down passing, 16 of 20, which is 80% completions, 8.5 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Now, he was sacked 5 times on first and second down, but he hung in there and completed 80% of his passes for 8.5 yards per attempt and a 119 passer rating against Carolina on the road with that offense. That bodes somewhat well for Tony Romo because their run game is a little bit better than what Washington has. I mean, it's actually a lot better than what Washington has, but then you got Tony Romo back there trying to throw the ball on first or second down. There's a chance that Romo is very efficient passing the ball early. And when you're efficient passing the ball early and you're somewhat balanced and you can run the ball early and be efficient there too, that's going to set you up for a lot of third and shorts or bypassing third down, which is exactly what the Dallas Cowboys need to have in order to keep the ball away from Cam Newton, who is a team that's going to want to possess the ball a lot as well. So if Dallas is going to hope to maintain time of possession in their big game coming up on Thanksgiving, they're going to need to control the ball. They're going to need to be efficient on first and second down, and that's exactly what Kirk Cousins was last week. So even though the Redskins got blown out, they have a much worse team than the Dallas Cowboys have right now. It's going to be very interesting to see what Dallas is able to do. In terms of players who struggled passing the ball on first and second down, Tom Brady, 15 of 30, which is 50% completions, a 56 passer rating because he threw one interception. Very poor day from Brady against the Bills, where he was just, most of those incompletions, there was only a few that he put in there where the receiver dropped it or he just kind of missed. A lot of those were passes that he was throwing into the dirt, throwing away. So that incompletion rate is a little bit high as a result of that. Aaron Rodgers, surprisingly, and Aaron Rodgers is going to be a name we're going to discuss a lot on the next couple of minutes here. Very poor passing day against the Minnesota Vikings. On first and second down, he went 10 of 23, which is only 44% completions, only 4.8 yards per attempt, a 58 passer rating. So he was terrible on early downs passing the football. And as I mentioned earlier in this podcast, the Green Bay Packers did not win the game because of Aaron Rodgers. He actually had a very bad game from what we expect out of Aaron Rodgers. I mean, a 58 passer rating on first and second downs, completing only 43% of his passes. When they're rarely throwing the ball deep down the field, they don't have those deep threats. So you can understand he might target Jordy Nelson 5 times. It's windy and Jordy catches only one of those balls. But they're not throwing the ball deep down the field like that 5 times. They're throwing everything to different types of receivers, most of which are much closer to the line of scrimmage, and that's a terrible completion percentage. When you look at the deep passing, we'll basically mention a couple of the same guys, but let's start with some of the guys who were able to pass the ball deep with very good success. First of which is Ryan Tannehill. On passes that traveled 15-plus yards in the air, Tannehill went 4 of 7 for 57% completions, 17 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, a 141 passer rating. Now, what did I just mention earlier? That Cam Newton and the Panthers like to throw the ball down the field. They do try to take shots down the field. And so that's going to play into this. The Miami Dolphins were very successful at passing the ball deep against the Dallas Cowboys last weekend. So that is going to be a factor here when Cam tries to take those shots that they definitely are going to be taking in this game to try to help open up that run game. On the reverse, I'll drop down to the 4th best rating from last week, and that's Tony Romo. Tony Romo only attempted 6 deep passes, which was still about average for the NFL last week. He completed 3 of them, but 2 were for touchdowns, and they were 11 yards per attempt on his 6 attempts. So, he didn't come out super conservatively. He was throwing the ball. He did not look like he had any issues with the injury, which is kind of what I was banking on. I was hoping that he wouldn't come out rusty at all, and he did not. And so that's going to set up for some attempts against the Panthers, which is why it's going to be vital for that Panthers defensive line to get pressure on Tony Romo. And conversely, it's going to be important that offensive line can keep Tony Romo clean in the pocket. He was definitely brushed up a little bit last week on the road in Miami. It's vital that offensive line, who's not used to blocking for Tony Romo, but has been doing a pretty bad job of blocking for these other backup quarterbacks who don't make good decisions and don't get the ball out quickly and kind of scramble around, and the line might not know where they are. The line should start to develop better chemistry, understanding and realizing where Tony Romo is going to be on some of these pass plays now that he's working more with that first-team offense and has had 1 game under his belt. They should be able to pass protect a little bit better, and Tony's got to be very decisive with his passes. Otherwise, that Carolina Panthers defensive line is going to really wreak havoc in the backfield. Russell Wilson had a great day passing the football down the field as well, and but that's to be expected against San Francisco, so that's why I think it's a big concern that Carson Palmer is going to light these guys up, because if you look at what Carson Palmer did just last week, even without Michael Floyd in there, he was 8 of 11. They took 11 deep shots against the Cincinnati Bengals, who have a better defense than does the San Francisco 49ers. Palmer completed 73%. That's ridiculous. 73% of his deep passes. That was the best of any quarterback in the NFL by a margin. 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 17.8 yards per attempt, and a 115 passer rating. So he went down in the field deep. He made some ill-advised throws earlier in the game that resulted in interceptions. But like I said earlier in this podcast, Bruce Arians has him keep going back to it. They know it's going to pay off, and it ultimately did. Some guys who were not throwing the ball very effectively down the field at all. Ryan Fitzpatrick had a terrible passing day deep down the field. 3 of 14, that's 21%. We moved from Carson Palmer, who completed 73%, down to Ryan Fitzpatrick, who completed 21% of his deep passes. Think about this. He attempted 14 passes that went at least 15 yards in the air. 14. He averaged 4.9 yards per attempt. That's pathetic. A 41 passer rating. Phillip Rivers, also very pathetic in terms of what he was trying to do down the field. He doesn't really have the receivers to work down the field. He attempted only 6 passes deep down the field. Think about this. Despite getting blown out by the Chiefs, you would think he's maybe attempting 10, 15 deep passes down the field, try to get his team back in the game. Only 6, only completed 1 of them. That's 16.7%. 2.8 yards per attempt. 1 completion in 6 attempts to pass the ball 15 plus yards in the air. And the other guy that we mentioned earlier, Brock Osweiler, only 2 attempts, 15 plus yards in the air against the Bears. They're going to have to attempt the ball deeper down the field against the New England Patriots. Now, a guy who's at the bottom of this list who is going to be playing this week in terms of deep passing attempts is Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. They did try to go deep against the Buffalo Bills 7 times. He only completed 2 of those. 1 was intercepted, and he had a 17.9 passer rating. So Brady had the worst passing week deep down the field of any quarterback who's going to be starting this next upcoming week. Joe Flacco actually had a worse day, but Joe Flacco is out for the year with a torn ACL. So Tom Brady is the guy with the 17.9 passer rating from last week. We'll see how much he's able to do this week against an even better defense at defending some of those passes. They're going to have to try to force the ball more to Rob Gronkowski. I would be shocked if they did not try to push the ball deep down the field a little bit more frequently to Rob Gronkowski in this game. In terms of scoring zone passing efficiency inside the opponent's 25, Carson Palmer right there at number 1 with a perfect passer rating, 4-4 with 3 touchdowns. Strong day against that Cincinnati Bengals defense. Russell Wilson, 5 of 5 with 2 touchdowns for a 151 passer rating. So now you got Carson Palmer, who just destroyed the Cincinnati Bengals, whether it's deep passing, whether it was early down passing, whether it was scoring zone passing. Now he's going up against a team that Russell Wilson of the Seahawks, who obviously they don't have the wide receiving threats. Obviously he doesn't necessarily have the arm talent from the pocket, the experience like Carson Palmer does in the pocket as a pure pocket passer. Now Carson gets to go up against a team that Russell Wilson absolutely obliterated last week in terms of his passing day in the San Francisco 49ers. So that game could get pretty interesting. Productive for the Arizona Cardinals as long as they maintain their focus and don't take the foot off the gas, which they could do. It's definitely a letdown spot for them. No doubt about that. Some of the guys who were miserable in terms of production inside the opponent's 25, one was pretty surprising to me, and it lost them the game, even though I was on the Denver Broncos, and that's Jay Cutler of the Chicago Bears. Against the Broncos, he went 3 of 10 inside the Broncos' 25-yard line. 30% completions, no touchdowns, no interceptions. His 10 attempts gained him a total of 17 yards, so that's 1.7 yards per attempt. 39.6 passer rating. Very bad day from Jay Cutler. How much of it was the production of the Broncos defense? How much of it was struggles? Jay Cutler drops, inconsistent throws. I think it was a little bit of everything there. Aaron Rodgers, another guy that we talked about. We said they didn't win the game because of Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers went 3 of 12 inside the Vikings' 25-yard line. 1 touchdown, no interceptions. That's why his passer rating is better than what it would otherwise be. It was a 67 passer rating, but 3 of 12. When you ever see Aaron Rodgers, 25% completions inside the opponent's 25-yard line, he averaged 1 yard per attempt. He attempted 12 passes and gained a total of 12 yards passing the ball inside the 25-yard line of the Minnesota Vikings. Just outrageous day from Aaron Rodgers. So with that said, I'll go ahead and throw one other stat up here, that the Baltimore Ravens, the only way that they kept that game close against the St. Louis Rams was because they started 4 drives inside the St. Louis Rams territory. 4 drives inside the Rams territory. Obviously, they ended up winning the game by 3 on a field goal, but on the drives they started inside the Rams territory, they put up 1 touchdown and 2 field goals. 1 touchdown and 2 field goals. That's 13 points right there that they scored when that came on drives that started inside the Rams territory. And if you look back at what this team did overall on the course of that entire game, they scored a total in that game of only 16 points. So 13 of those 16 points came on drives that started inside of St. Louis territory. The Ravens offense struggling completely. Even with Joe Flacco, Forsett, the players that they have that they now don't have, they were not getting anything done against the Rams defense without that field position. Now they lose those guys. They got to go on the road. It's going to be very tough on Monday night. All right, guys, that'll do it for the Thanksgiving edition of the Sharp Football Analysis Podcast. Though we recorded this one a little bit later in the week, so we modified the layout of it in terms of not breaking down every single game that we saw from the prior week, but just touching on some things that I thought were interesting takeaways or interesting previews of this week. Hopefully it will still give you some good inside information to this upcoming weekend of games. Hope that you guys have a awesome Thanksgiving with your friends and your family, and get to watch some great football games, enjoy some great food, have some great beverages. Be safe out there on the roads as well. And I will tell you that we are getting together with Evan Silva, same time as usual. That podcast will be up on Saturday. There's absolutely no change there. We'll be breaking down a couple less games than we would have been if these Thanksgiving games were later in the week, but it's going to be an awesome podcast to break things down once again with Evan Silva. So be on the lookout for that on Saturday. We'll get that out to you guys. And till then, have a safe and happy Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you guys later.
This is gonna be a fun ride. This is gonna be a fun ride.
Everybody one clap.
I'm gonna play when I wanna play, do what I wanna do. I'm gonna say what I wanna say. Did I say anything stupid today? Tomorrow is to take the ball deep, take the top off the defense. Take the ball deep, take the top off the defense.
If I can't get to it, nobody can get to it.
I don't shine shoes, I don't tape ankles, I don't cut checks.
Great cash, homie.
I don't shine shoes, I don't tape ankles, I don't cut checks.
Great cash, homie.
Everybody one clap. One clap. One clap. One clap.